20,000 years ago, stepping outside at night meant no light switch, no heater, and no help coming. The temperature could be 40 degrees colder than anything you've felt. The nearest tree might be 500 miles away. And yet people lived there. Not just survived, they raised children, made art, and passed down knowledge that outlasted the ice itself. We picture cavemen as barely getting by, shivering, waiting for the sun. That picture is wrong. Ice Age people weren't primitive. They were engineers, tailors, and planners. And a lot of how we handle hard times today, the coat you grab before walking outside, the group chat you use to organize your family, has roots in what they figured out first. Here's how they did it. And along the way, notice something: we haven't changed as much as you'd think. The world they lived in, the last major ice age, peaked around 20,000 years ago. Ice sheets more than a mile thick buried Canada, Scandinavia, and much of northern Europe, ice piled higher than most skyscrapers. Sea levels dropped so far that dry land connected continents, now split by ocean. Winters were long and brutal. Summers were short and cold. But the land wasn't empty. Herds of mammoths, reindeer, and wild horses moved across a frozen grassland called the Mammoth Steppe. Small bands of humans moved with them, usually just a few dozen people at a time, smaller than most workplaces today. That tiny group handled everything: hunting, cooking, childcare, tool-making, defense, and keeping every person warm enough to see the next morning. No backup, no emergency services. Whatever needed doing, that handful of people did it themselves, or it didn't get done. To survive that cold with no metal, no glass, and no matches, they needed four things: fire, clothing, shelter, and each other. Fire, the original power grid. Once temperatures dropped far enough, fire stopped being a convenience and became a public utility, the one resource everything else depended on. It cooked frozen meat, rendered fat for extra calories in the leanest months, sterilized tools, dried wet clothing, and kept predators away at night. And because a fire, once lost, might take hours to relight in freezing wind, people protected it the way we protect electricity and heating combined. They carried hot embers when they moved camp, like carrying a phone charger and never letting the battery drop too low. They stored dry fuel the way we stock a pantry before a storm. They kept flint and pyrite, the stones used to spark a flame, as prized possessions, the same way a household keeps a flashlight everyone knows where to find in the dark. Fire also gathered people. Late at night, with wind howling outside a hide shelter, the fire was where hunts were planned, and stories were told to children who needed to remember every word. It was the original living room, the original group chat, all in one glowing circle. When the power goes out today and a family ends up sitting around one candle talking instead of staring at screens, that's not new behavior, it's an old habit resurfacing. Clothing, the invention that changed everything for a long time. Even after early humans left Africa, they wrapped themselves in loose hides like a cape. That works up to a point. Then it stops working the moment the temperature really drops. The real breakthrough was a tool small enough to lose in the snow: the sewing needle. Carved from bone with a tiny eye drilled through the tip, needles like this show up around 40,000 years ago. Some historians call it one of the most important inventions in human history, right up there with the wheel. Here's why. A needle lets you build layers, the exact idea every outdoor clothing brand still sells today. A base layer against the skin, a middle layer to trap warm air, an outer layer to block wind and wet. Ice Age tailors did this tens of thousands of years before Gore-Tex existed, picking reindeer hide for outer warmth, softer fur for inner layers, and sewing 3 or 4 layers into fitted parkas and boots. This was clothing built the way modern mountain gear is built: layered, fitted, made to trap body heat instead of just blocking wind. That single invention is arguably what let humans push into the coldest parts of the planet at all. Without it, we likely don't reach northern Europe, Siberia, or the Americas on the timeline we did. Shelter, bone houses, and borrowed cliffs. Forget the deep, dark cave. Most Ice Age people lived in shallow rock shelters, wide overhangs cut into riverbank cliffs, a roof without 4 walls. They reinforced these constantly. Hides draped to block wind, snow banked for insulation, a fire kept near the entrance, the same instinct as someone today sealing a drafty window before winter. The most striking piece of Ice Age architecture, though, isn't a cave. In Eastern Europe, archaeologists have found circular dwellings built entirely from mammoth bones, some over 20,000 years old, bones for the frame, hides stretched over them, the same way a modern tent uses poles and fabric. A hearth burned at the center, a one-room house with central heating built from the largest animal on the steppe. Building one wasn't a one-person job. It took enough shared trust that a group would spend days building something none of them could build alone, not unlike roommates splitting the work of insulating a shared apartment before winter, because nobody makes it through the cold season alone. Feeding a body that's losing heat fast, surviving extreme cold, takes a huge amount of fuel, and in winter there's almost no plant food at all. So Ice Age diets leaned on animal fat and meat, and getting enough of it took hunts run more like a coordinated operation than a solo chase. In eastern France, hunters lit fires each spring and fall to steer migrating horse herds toward a natural funnel in the landscape, where animals could be killed in bulk. The meat was dried and stored for the months when nothing else was available, the same instinct behind a modern pantry stocked before a storm warning. The behavior expect the shortage, prepare in bulk, ration it out, hasn't moved in 20,000 years. A hunt like that also needed language, assigning roles, predicting where a herd would move, trusting each other completely. Staying fed likely helped drive how we talk, plan, and delegate, the same skills a modern team uses for anything too big for one person. Nobody survived alone, forget the lone caveman fending for himself. Ice Age survival was a team effort. Groups were small but surprisingly fair. Food and shelter were shared with the sick, injured, and elderly, not just the strongest hunters. That wasn't kindness for its own sake. It was strategy. An elder might be the only person who remembered how to survive a famine winter or exactly how a tool was made. Losing that knowledge could put the whole group at risk later. Keeping them fed was an investment in everyone's future, the same logic behind a family caring for an aging parent or a workplace keeping its most experienced person around. Work was divided by skill, but it all fed the same shared pool. And because surviving here took years of learned skill, children were raised by a whole group, not just two parents. The same instinct behind a kid today raised as much by grandparents and family friends as by their parents. Cooperation wasn't a bonus on top of survival. It was the actual technology. The same way a reliable group chat or a neighborhood checking on each other during a cold snap is still one of our best survival tools today. What's left in us, the Ice Age loosened its grip over thousands of years, glaciers retreating, the mammoth steppe slowly breaking into the forest we know today. But the people who lived through its coldest centuries left a working blueprint. Layer instead of drape, build together instead of alone, share instead of hoard, plan ahead, and never let the fire go out if you can help it. Think about the last hard stretch of whether you lived through a blackout, a blizzard. Chances are you gathered people into one room instead of spreading out, checked the flashlight batteries before you needed them, leaned on whoever knows how to fix things. None of that is a coincidence. It's the same four-part plan: fire, layers, shelter, each other, running on modern tools. Every one of us is descended from someone who made it through nights colder than anything we'll likely face, nights with no roof but a rock and a hide, no heat but a fire someone kept alive on purpose, and no safety net but the handful of people next to them. We didn't just inherit their genes. We inherited their strategy. And most of us are still quietly running it every winter without ever noticing where it came from.